Hey everybody, this is Liz back with you today. And today I have Corey Williams back with us, who gave us his story, which was a huge blessing to a lot of you, you said. And it's so cool to hear the background of people. But today he's gone through the spring rush after taking over our corporate location in Bellingham, Washington as the GM. And he took it after there was a GM that wasn't all he should have been. And so he had to pick up the pieces, regroup, and then come back to make this year. We're going to hear about whether it was successful or not. So, first of all, just give us a little bit of a review of when you came to Augusta and kind of the progression up till now in your position.
Sure. Let's see. So I moved to Washington almost 3 years ago now. I was working at a grocery store when I first moved up here. I was married at the time, and I just needed, I needed a job. So I got into a grocery store. It was about $14 an hour, which was still good compared to what I had in California. But I needed something better, something a little bit more, something I could provide with a little bit more. And so I saw an ad on Indeed.com that was $18 an hour. And I was like, okay, sure. I don't care what it is. I'll do anything for $18 an hour. That was almost double my old pay in California. So I took it. I got hired. I worked at Augusta Lawn Care for almost exactly a year. And then I got promoted to general manager after that.
And so, just for those listening today, what do you think it was that you were even asked? Had you had any previous landscape industry, or were they watching you and like had this crisis and brought you in? But what would have attracted them to you?
I had started with no experience. I'd never touched a lawnmower. I didn't know what a string trimmer was.
Wow.
Yeah, I had nothing. I couldn't lift the trimmer for more than about 15 minutes without getting sore. But my general manager at the time, Marcus Roberts, owner of the Redmond location, was telling me about the franchising. He was telling me about who Mike is and what Mike wants to do, and here's what Command Center is. And I'd never heard of things like this, and it was such an interesting thing, and it was this severe, robust system of success. And he
Mm-hmm.
told me about the Audible account program that we have of self growth and learning, and I was starstruck, and so it was wonderful timing. I had a lot more time on my hands, and at the same time, because I had started a little bit later, somebody was chosen for general manager over me at the time of my hiring. But like Liz was saying, it didn't work out. And so when that person was ready to leave Augusta Lawn Care, someone needed to move in, and I was available for it.
Yeah. So when that happened, you already had a little bit unrest in yourself, and from what I remember, was really wanting to leave. Long story short, I had come over there for a day. This person you didn't even know, and stuff had happened with somebody on the route. I fired somebody, which seemed like I was way out of my place to do. So you're watching all of this. Were you done with your divorce or in the middle of it?
I was right at the start of it, actually. So
Yes,
it
you
was at
had
a point in
all
my
this,
life. Oh, go ahead.
you had all this stuff going on,
Yeah.
a little bit unrest about the company, unrest about what had just happened. And so when they offered you the position, were you hesitant, or you thought this is, they offered you a raise and a position? Did you think, okay, I kind of need to do this. This is my leg up?
My original thoughts were, as Liz was saying, I really did want to leave. And when that person was fired, I wasn't really so focused on the perspective of that situation, but I was, like I was going through all this kind of stuff, and I was just super distraught dealing with, my home life and whatnot. I was like, this is wonderful. I don't have time to deal with this Augusta drama.
Yeah.
But Nick, or not, no, sorry, not Nick, Lee came to me and he asked me what I thought would make things better for the team. And because, from Lee's perspective, he was busy. He was focused on franchise sales, setting up, new trainees and all this kind of stuff. And then all of this, everything's a disaster, and come in, fix things. Liz, come in, help fix things. And part of what really got me on corporate side, so to speak, was that as soon as I was ready to start paying attention again, I saw that you guys were like, how do we fix things? How do we make things better? How do we make people happy with this place? Why isn't this place a place people want to work, and all that kind of stuff? And I was like, okay, the perspective that I have at the moment is not accurate to how things are actually like they actually are. And
Mhm.
so when the position was offered to me, one of the first things I was thinking was like, I know how to do the field work. And after watching the previous general manager, I was comfortable enough with my own thoughts of I know what was wrong. And so I thought, great, I just have to not do that and work hard, and things will be fine. And that was kind of why I decided to stick it out for that and give it a shot.
Wow. So we're going to have GMs that are going to watch this.
Mm-hmm.
They've been part of the team, and maybe they were offered the position either of an estimator or a GM, let's say a GM, and now they're going to be responsible for people they used to work with. How did you earn their trust enough for them to know that you're kind of going to be telling them how it's going to go, quote unquote, bossing them around? How did you establish that with your team?
Before anything else, I would say to like GMs or upcoming GMs or estimators and whatnot, I will say that taking up that leadership position really changes you. And if it doesn't change you, you're not taking it seriously enough. It is a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And for me in that position, when I was going from basically a field technician to into management and then moving forward past that and not becoming a manager, but becoming a leader, a genuine leader, was my approach and my styles just kept changing. And so at the start of it, my approach was, because people weren't happy, I was coming at it with a very emotional approach. Let's be open with each other. Let's talk about our feelings with each other. I do side one-on-ones. I'd be like, hey, I know the job is getting a little bit better, but aside from that, how are you doing? It looks like my camera froze.
That's okay. At least we can hear the audio and it'll catch up, hopefully.
Sure. Okay. And so that was my original start to it, was coming out very emotionally, almost to a detriment. And I would say to a detriment. After a certain amount of time, a lot of the people who were on the team with me were either people who had joined after me and people who didn't care too much either way, or people who had been there for multiple years before me. In fact, the people who were on the team are the people who had trained me and had potentially even trained my general manager when I was first hired. So they've been there a while.
Mm-hmm.
And with those guys, I really did have to take a different approach. I deferred some of the harder conversations at the time to Lee, because Lee had been their general manager when they were hired and whatnot, and so he was able to help me with some of that. But I tried to just jump right into it and take as much of the reins as possible, so that I could say that, like, however that relationship went, I was the one making the decision because I was responsible for the team.
Yeah. So this general manager that was there before, was he demoted? Can you hear me still?
Yes.
Was he demoted or did he actually get fired?
At first, he was demoted. He was amazing in the field. And when he got promoted, I believe that was the main selling point, is that he knew how to work hard. But when he got into the management position, I think it was a little bit too difficult for him to handle hard conversations.
Mm-hmm.
And look for ways where it was his fault, even if it wasn't. That kind of inescapable extreme ownership, where the first thing you do is think, what did I do wrong and how do I fix it? That was pretty tough. And so he seemed to check out a little bit. He went straight to estimator after a period of time, but he didn't really have his heart in it. And so he got let go after about a couple weeks, 2-3 weeks.
Do you think that it's actually possible that somebody could be in a position of leadership, be quote unquote demoted, or even at their own request, like say, I just can't do this? Do you think it's possible for them to be successful in the field?
I do. I think that as you move up in things, the kind of the curve, it's like an exponential curve of the amount of skills and discipline and hard work and time that you have to commit to something just to get a little bit better. But at the start of things, you can do really well just managing yourself a little bit, because in the field, you know, you don't even really have to manage yourself. You have the general manager who sets your route. He will do the upsells for you if you send him the videos and whatnot. He gives you the bonuses. He tells you whether or not you're doing well. And that's all you really have to focus on. You just got to push the mower and get through the day. But when you get into management, oh, go ahead.
No, you go ahead. Go ahead and finish that thought.
When you get into management, it's not just a matter of kind of pushing yourself. It's pushing yourself completely, being your own leader, and then also keeping an eye on other people's needs for leadership and where it's time, it's time for that person to grow a little bit. It's time for that person to work a little bit more. That's a real change. And I definitely don't think it's impossible for somebody to be good at one without the other. But I also think that you can go back. I think that some people are really good at, self-control and controlling themselves in this situation. I think that the previous general manager would have been really good at that if he had just stayed in the field and had good conversation and just focus on that and then go off to do something new and maybe become a leader down the road. But at least in this circumstance, it was the leadership aspect that put the wall up.
Mm-hmm. So you're thrown into this without pretty much in a crisis, which I would say a lot of GMs are. It's not always that somebody's being groomed, and okay, now so-and-so is moving off with their future and you're going to go into this role. It's more like, oh my word, now I'm this general manager. I'm sure it caused a little bit of anxiety and stuff. Like, I know George Washington made a comment like he wasn't, I told you this a few weeks ago, he didn't feel worthy of the command that he had or capable really of the command that he had. What did you try to do right away to change yourself to be able to do this? Did you listen to new books, podcasts? Did you reach out to a mentor and say, like, this is a lot, can you help me? Or did you just fly by the seat of your pants?
In some ways I studied, in some ways I flew by the seat of my pants. So when it came to operate, because when I took the position, my main focus was the team and the team culture. In retrospect, and for listeners, I really approach things from the perspective of, there's sales, there's ops, and there's admin. And my main focus was on the ops, was, getting quality back where things needed to be and creating good team culture. And so I spent a lot of time focusing on that. When it came to the admin side, I relied on Lee a lot, and I really was winging it for a little while. And then with sales, I had maybe a couple weeks of estimator training. I trained with the previous general manager before his position was really set in stone, before he knew if he wanted to be in the field doing sales or in the office and whatnot. So I did a little bit of training just in case. But I just flew right into that, and I figured, I don't know how to be a good salesman, so I'm just going to go and put the work in, put the reps in, and see what happens. And so I focused mostly on team culture. I learned a lot about that. I learned a lot of good lessons about that and different ways to approach situations and how do people respond to my approach to things. Because I hadn't ever been in a situation where my approach to something was whether or not it was the best option, was the option that was going to happen. And so I had to learn how people responded to my performance and leadership.
Yeah, that makes total sense. So what about the office admin side of things? You're immediately thrown into the role. As far as I know, you had never worked on that side or ever seen that side of how service autopilot works, plus the routing and dispatching. Did Lee jump in and do that with you? Like you shadowed him for a few days? Because anybody that's a GM would wonder how they merge into that role when they've never seen the back end of anything.
Yeah. For the first week, I would say, Lee did the routing for me, and I was just focused on doing the sales. So just getting out there, getting into a good routine, get involved with the customers, talk to people, get some work on the schedule. Once there was some work on the schedule and whatnot, Lee showed me how the dispatching worked, and then I just took it right away. And I made plenty of mistakes doing that. But it was just kind of, I got to jump in. And this was also, Lee was supposed to be really ramping up for franchise related stuff. So he needed to get out of Bellingham quickly. So it was like, I got to get stuff off this guy's plate. because I didn't know him very well at the time. It's just like, I got to make sure I'm not looking like I'm not working fast enough. I had no idea how hard general managers are supposed to work, or what they did, or what the people who came before me did, how their performance was, their efficiency, all that kind of stuff. I was just, I've got the job now. It'd be a shame to lose it. I just need to get stuff off to his plate and just work and get stuff done.
Yeah. So when you first started that and they talked about your compensation, did they keep you on hourly or did they move you to a salary position?
I have stayed on hourly. I was originally for $23 an hour when I was moved to the management position. The base pay at Bellingham was 18. It's now 20. And instead of going to salary, what we decided to do was, because the following year, so this year, was not prospected to be fantastic, especially for the first couple of quarters, I was given a pretty good profit sharing package
Okay.
for the year. So for the first 2 quarters, I basically expect no profit because we're going to be focused on growing the business, getting things back to where we want it to be. And then hopefully in the latter two quarters of the year, we bring in some profit, and I even it out over those 2 months and get a decent amount of profit sharing for the whole year overall.
Okay. And then what was the revenue at with the company? It was struggling. So it was negative each month, or kind of where were we?
When I had originally taken over, our spring rush was negative, but the really big kicker about it was that we had done so much damage to our recurring client base. We dissatisfied so many people that we lost almost everybody within
Wow.
the first couple weeks of summer. So the months following that, I know we had a decent amount of revenue. We did over 100K in revenue for like the first 3-4 months of summer, and then after that, I think we did 80s for the rest of the year until December.
And then did you go to winter services?
We did go to winter services.
And about how many clients switched over, like a percentage?
We had about 40% switch over.
Okay. And do you do snow or Christmas lights, anything like that at that time?
At the time, Christmas lights was not yet a part of Augusta Lawn Care Services. We did do snow removal in the past through general managers previous to me, but due to some of the difficulties that had arisen from that and the severe business model switch that requires, we decided to stop doing that 2 years before my tenure at Augusta Lawn Care Services. And so I was strictly projects, winter services.
Wow. So you were trying to be an estimator too and learn the office stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anybody that's listening, it is not an easy transition. If you have a vision of the company and you have a drive to succeed and you want to personally have a growth mindset and go for it, it's going to be hard at the beginning, but over time it'll be worth it. Was that your mindset?
Yes, absolutely. One thing that I had the whole time of taking it over was, and this is actually something I said to Mike when he first gave me the position, was I would be crazy to pretend like I know what I'm doing, or like I could sneak anything past you early. I am just going to do what you guys say and figure this out and work hard until I've got it. And I had known from the start, Mike is the kind of guy who will give you the opportunity to succeed and then let you just figure it out and let you succeed. And I figured if I just put the work in, if he thinks it's possible, I will do it. And so I've put the work in until I could do it.
Yeah. From the owner's point of view, when you bring somebody on like this, was he hands-on, or did he just say, here, take it and run, and this is what I need to see for revenue, and this is what you need to do right now? Or did he kind of give that to Lee to guide you? But most people aren't going to have a Lee, so the owner would probably have to be a little more involved at first.
Mm-hmm. At least as far as Mike goes, not only was he fully hands-off, when he gave me the general manager position, he was in North Carolina doing his 30-day challenge. He
Right.
wasn't even here.
Wow.
So I hadn't seen him for about 2 months after I had gotten the position. I didn't see him that whole time. And then after he had gotten back from that and was doing, franchise related stuff, he was setting up 6 locations.
Yep.
Mike was beyond busy. And he was like, here you go. You take it and run with it. Have fun. And so even up until about now, now that I'm really in a position and I'm in an understanding where I could have those kind of numbers conversations, he's
Mm-hmm.
still very open and loose about it. He's left a lot of it up to me and whether or not I wanted to use the year fully for business growth or for profit
Mm-hmm.
or what's the 5-year plan and all that kind of stuff. He's left it very open ended.
Mm-hmm. He's also very numbers oriented, data oriented, and non emotional about that. So there's pressure. Did you feel pressure?
At the start of it, ironically, I felt none. I had no pressure in my head because I was so focused on my personal drama and
Yeah.
I was so genuinely, I was so distraught from it that I didn't have the capacity to feel stressed out about the job or put myself down about the mistakes I was making with routing or, I didn't handle a sale well. And if I didn't blow that, I probably would have gotten the job and so on and so forth. And so as time has gone on, the better I get at this, the more worried I am about my performance and the more giddy I get about Mike Andes showing up at my building and all that kind of
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah. Well, there's been a ton of transitions and you've got the company back on its feet, but then you got here in the spring and you were doing follow-up calls. There was an estimator. He quit, couldn't handle it. So now you're doing both. Has it been overwhelming this year, especially when you're working your butt off, doing everything you can, and you guys just aren't getting the revenue in and the leads that you need?
It has definitely been a stress inducing. I don't want to say it's stressful.
Mm-hmm.
And there have been my approach to it is, if you think that quitting is an option, you'll quit at some point. You'll have a breaking point. But for
Yeah.
me, with the position, at least from my perspective, this was something that I was led to in my life at this period of my life. This is where I'm supposed to be. So many transitions had happened in my life where this was the perfect thing that lined up. This is where I'm supposed to be in the eyes of God. And so quitting is just not an option. Giving up is not an option, which means getting through it is an option. So some way, somehow, I'm going to get through, whether it's crew drama or I don't have the workflow or the market's not great, whatever it is, getting through it is the only option. So
Mm-hmm.
overwhelmed is definitely something I wouldn't take off the table. But I would say that after a certain point, it just got to, I'm going to do everything I can do until I need to stop. And then I will stop. And if there is a fire, I will deal with the fire as soon as I can deal with it again.
Mm-hmm. Add to the complexity of all that, you were switching to Copilot, which has all of its own, like you're learning it. Were you thinking when you went into that, I don't know what's a bug, I don't know what's a user error, or did you have the mentality that, okay, there's going to be lots of bugs, there's going to be lots of things that I need to learn? What was your approach to that? Because that's going to be the way a lot of people feel if they're in other businesses. They get the position of GM, and now their owner is forcing them to move over to Copilot.
Yes. For me, even though for the audience's perspective, Liz and I work directly for Mike. We're Augusta Lawn Care corporate. We're not franchisees. We work directly with Copilot. My perspective on it was not really any different than any other individual. Mike just asked, like, let me know when you guys are ready to switch over to Copilot. And I said, let's just rip the Band-Aid off, get started on it. And there were plenty of problems at the
Oh,
time,
yes.
at the time of the recording. We're still going through some. We're
Yeah.
still working things out. But my approach to it was there were already things that I had issues with in our previous CRM. And what's more important than figuring out, the little details here and there and sequence automations and trigger factors and all kinds of stuff was what do I absolutely need to know to run this business no matter what? And
Mm-hmm.
how do I make sure that I can keep a thumb on that and keep a pulse on that without having to worry about knowing what I'm doing? And so for me, that meant knowing how to do the routing, knowing where my estimates are, and knowing how to get money from those, basically get payments, get invoicing paid. That was my only focus. And for the first 2-3 months, that's all I worried about because
Mm-hmm.
all of the other features were still in development. They were still working on it. And that's how I kind of kept things going, kept my head above the water as far as all of that kind of stuff. And I put the manual labor in for the features that we were still waiting Copilot to have. For example, emailing clients of a one click and, an upsell free marketing option. I'd find other avenues to do that. I'd have the crew knock on doors to ask if people wanted services until that feature was ready.
When you started, they were using Command Center, and franchisees would be interested in this. And those that are thinking of becoming a franchisee, what task did Command Center do for you when you started?
When I started, they have done so the Bellingham location is on full services, emphasis on the full. For me, because I don't have an estimator and I don't have an office assistant, I offload everything I can to Command Center so that I can focus on working with the team, working on quality, and working on sales. And so currently the biggest thing that I have is P for P calculations. One, because I have a good number of people on the team. That saves me a lot of time when I should be working on other things. Phone minutes is huge, but more than that, having Max is extremely helpful. Having the web form is extremely helpful. Almost all of my new recurring clients, and right now we have about 300 plus at the Bellingham location. We went from, I think it was 80 to 300 over the spring rush.
Awesome.
Almost all of that is through voicemails left with Max AI or using the franchise web page or people calling into the Command Center. I have not spoken to one person this year to set them up for mowing or recurring services. They call in, Command Center takes care of that for me, and I just throw it on the schedule. It's a wonderful thing.
Awesome. So when the owner gives you the right to run the location, since we are corporate, you were forced to use full service, which for other franchisees, anybody listening, it's an a la carte menu. So they get their phones answered, their estimates done, but then they can pick all these more complicated services that if they didn't know how to do, didn't want to do, didn't have time to do, they could throw over to us and we do them. Over time, though, because the owner puts you under pressure to bring profit in, what was your thought process on that when, you and I have talked before, my Command Center bill is so big, how do I get that down? And so then you kind of have to choose, you're between a rock and a hard place because you're supposed to be getting this revenue and yet you need Command's help, but it's expensive. So what did we do when that time came and you're like, I gotta take some of this back myself?
Yeah. One of the first things that I took back was the texting feature. Because I was only really using that for marketing, I figure I'm going to send that out. And then if I'm going to be focusing on the sales hard anyways, I might as well just spend the time taking care of that.
Mm-hmm.
Other than that, almost originally I took a few services off, but I've put a few back on since then because my approach to it has been, Oh, that's right. I did take like follow-up calls and estimate related things off of Command Center's plate because I had an estimator. That's one of the things that I took off, and then I've recently given back because the estimator that we had hired ended up not staying in the location.
Yeah. Wow. A lot of pressure there. And so when you took stuff back and then you handed it back over after a while, was your mentality like, I need to be selling jobs? And if I can sell more jobs, it'll cover this 10, 12% that I'm paying to Command Center by, offsetting that by making more sales. Was that how you were thinking about it?
Partially, definitely like focusing more on sales and getting some more stuff on the schedule. But my current approach is actually to have all of our recurring services cover all of our expenses. And
Okay.
right now, our Command Center bill, even with almost everything on, our recurring revenue alone is enough to cover, assuming that the crew is making P for P for the watchers, our recurring revenue alone is enough to cover my expenses, Command Center bill, and payroll, and like some repairs and whatnot. And so that's where my head has been, is that getting our recurring revenue high enough and having enough recurring clients to where that can cover all of our expenses and cover what I need Command Center for.
Yeah. So, okay. So Mike considers like 10 to 12% good for a company. Do you charge e-fees to cover your Command Center's bills?
We definitely used to. I stopped doing it last year because of kind of how difficult it was for me to get stuff on the schedule. I wasn't really good enough with salesman trick tactic things. Really, I just didn't realize that there's no such thing as salesman trick and tactics. It's just, be the person who's able to provide value to that person and communicate that value. But I wasn't aware of that. I didn't know how to handle those kinds of things. And we weren't doing well from the recurring side. So I didn't have free upsell property cleanup opportunities. So I took e-fees off. I took dump removal fees and whatnot, because at the Bellingham shop, we can dump debris on site. And going through winter, I kept it off. And then this year, because of how hard it honestly has been to get stuff on the schedule, I've kept e-fees off even until now, up until very, very recently when we raised our prices.
Okay, and then if you didn't have a lot of dumping, would you remove the dump fee too if you were just trying to get stuff on the schedule?
I would say no. If I did have to dump material at our local dump and whatnot, I would bake that in. There are some things I think are good to waive profit on. For example, material costs. If you're going to do like a mulch install and whatnot, I think it's fine to waive the cost on that. Or if it's a small enough amount of material, let's say $60, I think it's fine to waive. But when you have to dump all of your clippings, for example, you have to dump all your project debris, you don't have a trailer yet, so you have to do multiple runs. I think that your time lost doing that is extremely valuable. And I think that you should be, if you're not going to be able to make profit doing that by doing more jobs in the hour and a half every day you have to dump, you should be at least compensated to break even for that, in my personal opinion.
Yeah, that's really smart. So when you started, you had to build the culture back up. And then how did your leadership change as you got the culture back up, but then people gave pushback? I'm sure you had to start hiring and firing. So how did your leadership strategy change?
My original approach was very, very, very emotional, very personal. So I was really focused on making sure people felt like they were seen, they were understood, heard. I'm here for you. Let's talk about your personal life. What do you want from this job? Not everybody would have reciprocated that. So I gave them a lot more distance and free range, because they were treating me like they wanted that kind of distance and free range. The people who were here longer, people here, my predecessors in the field, I didn't know how to handle that. And so I gave them some distance. As time has gone on, I've gone through a lot more, scenarios and whatnot. I've interacted with a lot of different people. I have noticed that up to a certain point, that can actually be a little bit detrimental for a team. There are people who need to be treated sternly, but also fairly. And then there are people who just need to be treated like stern, and you need to just call them out for things. And they appreciate that afterwards, because they realize it, but they go through life not realizing that's how they operate. It's like, until somebody tells me I'm fully out of line, they think that they're perfect. And it's a weird thing, but that's just how I think managing goes. And so my approach has really changed to be more observant. At first, I try to give people a lot more kind of leg room to express themselves, so that once I get to know them as people, then I can be more stern in general and then focus more on their personal growth. And I've seen some pretty good results with that.
How has it been for you hiring people?
When I originally hired for the Bellingham location, like we were talking about, this was my first spring rush as a manager. And so I was going in completely blind. I was coming off the heels of winter where we were really cash starved. And I was very optimistic. I did not have the experience that I have now. And so I was like, let's just hire 30 people. Let's do 3 million in revenue on a location that barely did one. Yeah. I was throwing numbers around, and I was happy to do it. I did not know what I was talking about. But I was like, let's do it. I'm going to hire 30 people. Lee was like, yeah, go for it, man. Just knock it out of the park. Have fun with that.
Totally.
So I hired 32, 28 were ready to start past the initial training date. What I did is I had everybody meet a one day. I walked them around the shop. I taught them how to use tools. I took them out. We did a little route. And then I staggered their starting by about 2 weeks, every 4 people.
Smart. Yeah.
So that I would be able to like ramp up the workflow or I'd be able to ramp the staff count as the workflow increased into Spring Rush.
And then how many of them did you lose?
I think I lost 8 total before they had started. So people who would like, okay, hey, I found actually another really awesome opportunity in a personal life field that I really want to go into. And so I'm not going to start at Augusta next month. I was like, okay, great. That's awesome. I had 4 or 5 people that I had to fire in the first week because they weren't showing up on time or at all. And then the remainder, I think I had to fire 7 people after they had gone through their 2-week training period. And those were the really hard ones, because the early ones where people are not meeting the bare minimum for people who have no other expectations than to just meet 2 or 3 bottom lines.
Mm-hmm.
Those are easy.
Yeah. So at the same time, you and I were banging out interviews and hiring people. And my goal was the same, to overhire, knowing that some of them wouldn't work out. But you had enough people, right? Even more than enough as you got started.
I did. So basically March 1st, I had 8 times my scheduling capacity.
Wow.
For the period. If I had started everybody at once, I was very overprepared. Honestly, this is one of the retrospects, is I was too overprepared for the season.
Which nobody says that.
I know, right? I had a lot of people. It got me a lot of experience. I had, I think, 150 interviews that I had done to get the rep, because it was the time to do it, get the reps in. So I got the reps in. I met with a lot of people. One of the biggest mistakes that I made doing that was, because I was so focused on getting people in the door and getting people who were good for what I thought would be good team culture, I basically spent my 15-20 minute interview just bragging about the company. I bragged about the franchise. I bragged about who Mike was, what Augusta stands for, audible, self-growth, development. And what I was looking for in these interviews was people to agree that that was nice and that felt good.
Mm-hmm.
What I didn't do, go ahead.
You're saying that you did that, but it maybe wasn't the right thing to do.
It wasn't the right thing to do.
Yeah.
It's good to express that to people, but I have found that it's very easy to agree that good things are good. It's another thing for somebody to reciprocate that. And that's what I needed to look for.
Yeah, that's super good. I did the same thing. And because I probably, like you, was good at selling, I could sell the vision of the company. And by the time they left, they absolutely wanted to work for us, for sure. I don't see you at all now. Are you still there?
I'm still here.
Yay. Okay. Maybe your photo will come back up, but I know that most people just listen anyway because we're just sitting here. So that's great. So usually it's the owner that would be in Lee's position, kind of guiding you along, and then the owner would step away. So at what point, we know Mike was hands off, but at what point did you kind of move Lee out so you could just run the thing yourself?
Let's see. I took over to a soft extent, probably about 2-3 weeks after I was hired as the general manager.
Wow.
So Lee would still be involved with a lot of things. Because Lee and I were in the same office, I would turn around and if there's something I didn't know how to do, just, hey Lee, how do I deal with this? Or we've got a property manager who's freaking out. I don't know how to deal with this. Or somebody wants a refund and it kind of makes sense, but also they can't. And he's like, do this, do that. Here's how you figure out how to solve the problem. And it was basically just that throughout all of the year into winter. Mm-hmm. After that had started, Lee, at the time, for retrospect, he was pretty focused still on sales and catching up. We had somebody on the leadership team who left and had given a lot of work over to the other people on the leadership team. So Lee was also really overbooked dealing with that and his sales responsibilities.
Yeah.
So it wasn't until the spring rush that he actually had the time available to participate in the Bellingham location. Mm-hmm. But what we ended up doing was we stayed in the same position where he would give me tips and I would ask him questions, and he would just focus and book his calendar out on selling the franchise. He and Mike have really come to this decision that we want to grow the franchise, and that's what Lee does. So Lee needs to be super focused on that. And until very recently, he was at the Bellingham shop when the owner success manager at the time, Nick Reed, was hired and moved into the position. It took, I think, about 2 months for him to take over Lee's involvement in my location and the Mount Vernon location. And then since then, Lee is completely uninvolved in the Bellingham location. And he has been free of it for about 2-3 weeks now.
Yeah, which is super cool. And then he's moving on to just 100% sales, which will help us a lot. So that's a whole nother transition for you, bringing Nick in, who was really kind of a peer, but owned his own Augusta. So how has that experience been for you? Because he's now the regional manager, so he's the one you answer to.
Yes. My original thought was that I just didn't know how to get him involved in things.
Yeah.
Because all of what I was really doing was just I'd ask Lee a question if I needed to, and then
Mm-hmm.
that was it. But now that Nick is on the team, I could say that it is such a blessing to have him. He has such a unique perspective on the business. He started from zero and built his location up. For me, of course, I'm just moving into the general manager position on a pre-existing location.
Mm-hmm.
So he and I have different struggles as far as business needs, and in some cases, some of the leadership aspects of volume. I would say I just have a lot more people to deal with, but his experience is so invaluable for that. He and I have broken down a lot of things that were kind of like walls that I have personally had that have prevented me from growing the location more and seeing more of the future of the location and setting things up. And he's very involved in the planning for things, the marketing, um, just really the vision of the location. It's very, very helpful.
That's fantastic. If you were talking to the owner and the owner had handed everything off to you, what would it make you feel like if the owner just stepped in and started, oh, we're going to do it like this, or we're going to do it like this? Would you, as the GM, like step up and say, you've given me this position, just, just let me do my thing and then prove to you I can do this? I'm sure there are owners that do that when things get rough.
Yes. I would say I actually would have originally agreed with that kind of approach. I would have, because I work for Mike Andes, and it's Mike Andes' location. And at least when it comes to business, Mike knows a little bit more than I do. So my approach to it was always, if Mike says do something, do it. But I have noticed after I've been the general manager for a year and a month now, is that Mike refuses to operate that way. He
Yeah.
will not come in and tell me, just do this, do that, and do this. He requires that I figure things out and that I learn what I'm doing and that I take responsibility for everything.
Yeah. Which is almost harder in a company this big.
It definitely, at first it is. But I've noticed, like, if you approach a problem from the perspective of eventually I'll solve this, you'll solve the problem. You just have to put the time in to do it until you're good enough to figure it out. And Mike knows that. I think he did that with experience. And so he really refuses to jump in and take the reins over on anything. We did recently do our price raises, as I was mentioning. And in retrospect, really good move, really good for us, really good for me mentally, because I don't have to worry so much about our margins. But he was, raise them if you want to. You want to stay in growth mode, go ahead. But he was like, this would be a good time to raise prices if you wanted to. And we ended up doing it, and it was a great idea.
Yeah, and where that would be an instance where the owner's like, this is what you should do, like you said. But what were your feelings about that? I mean, you already just were getting people on the schedule, and you know that people might leave if you raise the prices.
Yeah, my original approach to the spring rush was build the location up as much as physically possible for the next year, maybe even two, and just stay in growth mode for a full year, 2 years, and truck through it. If we were, a brand new location, maybe that would have been sustainable. But at this size, with $1 million in revenue, with 10, 15 staff members, with 300 clients, and I don't have an office assistant, I don't have an estimator. It just was not sustainable, and
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't have possibly kept up with that workload by myself. And so I was a little bit disheartened at first because I did want to keep everybody on,
Yeah.
but after running the numbers and taking a look at it, it has ended up being more beneficial for us, even though we've lost probably 30 people at this point.
Wow.
We are still about 20,000 more in top line revenue from our recurring services just because we raised our prices by almost 33% across the board.
Wow. That is huge for any owner and any GM to hear, to be brave enough to do that if they're just just not making it. That most people are just afraid that they just work their butts off to get all these customers. Hello, we spent this money to get these customers and now we might lose them all. What about people that you recently sold lawn care to? Did you raise those as well, or did you kind of do a filter so that you would only be doing past recurring clients?
We, actually, we were originally planning on leaving people who were brought on immediately to leave them out as well. So people who were brought on basically within 2 weeks prior to the price raise. But we made a mistake doing the process, and some of them actually did get raised.
Oh no.
Some of them did leave. Some of them did leave us 1-star reviews for that, which
No
is fair
kidding.
enough. But one thing that I actually didn't plan on, which I'm going to continue to do, which has ended up being really beneficial, is with this price increase, we have kept our introductory price at the same rate. So
Got
people are still joining at the same frequency, and those jobs were still profitable. The profit's a lot lower on those, of course. But all of our older clients are now people, the properties where my crew already knows the jobs. They're making way more money on those. And so my efficiency score going through Spring Rush has gone from 70% to, and I'm not kidding, listeners, my efficiency score has gone from 70 to 95 to 140.
Oh my
My
God.
crew is doing amazing. They're happy. They're making bonuses. All of them have had on this most recent pay period. This is the first full pay period since we did the raise. Is 400. The one guy had $900 in bonuses.
Oh my goodness.
They are working 50-hour, 60-hour pay periods. They're not working full 80 hours to get that. And so my crew is very happy. It also makes it very easy for me to discipline them because I got to make sure quality is good. I have a lot of new hires who are not disciplined in the field. They're not experienced. I can now focus on that, and because they're making money, the boss coming and saying, do this better, work harder, work faster, work more efficiently, is a lot harder to do when you're not making money at the same time.
Definitely. Yeah. So then you're more inspiring them, but now you can more like draw the line, like yellow slips. Do you have less yellow slips now because they're going fast, or more, or how's that worked out for you?
At the moment, I have a lot more yellow slips because the price raise has frustrated people.
Yeah.
And it's okay to frustrate your clients with this kind of thing. For the Bellingham location, not only did I need it from a revenue perspective, I needed it from a leadership perspective. I wouldn't have been able to do a good job leading the team if I was constantly worried about making, a 3% margin every month. And that would have been, 90-hour. I've been working 115-hour work periods from March to now.
Mhm.
And that's just not sustainable.
Nope.
In order to do a 3%, 1.5% margin, you've got to give yourself some breathing room.
Yeah.
And I needed that breathing room. And so clients are more upset now. They're a little bit aggravated, but I only lost 9% of my recurring clients doing this price increase for 30% almost increase. So what you can take away from that is, and this is what I'm doing with my team, is people who are staying but are frustrated are letting us actually know about their frustrations. What does
Yeah.
that mean for me? Send the crew back, fix it immediately. And that's all you have to do. You finally have the actual feedback from clients you want. Now you have the opportunity to fix it because you're not worried about, losing people at every corner. Like I am okay with losing. I lost 4 people this weekend from the price increase because I
Right.
did the invoicing.
Yep.
And now people are seeing it and they're like, okay, well, I'm canceling. I'm not stressed out about that. Go
Mhm.
back a month, I'd be freaking out.
Well, yeah. Yeah. So you've really grown as a person just because you've experienced all these things and had these challenges. Now, what about your hours? Because when I worked there and had all that responsibility, I'm trying to do all these yellow slips, all the guys. The max I had was 19 guys in the field, 6 of them were training. So those routes were all doubled up. And it was extremely difficult. And sometimes I didn't have it down like all the Augusta locations do now with budgeted hours. I just sold jobs and put them on the schedule. So the poor guys, they were totally overworked, but for some insane reason, they stuck it out with me. But sometimes I would be there from 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. It was like I did a whole day of work. The crew came back. And then I started a whole nother day of work because I was wrapping up their stuff from the day, planning the stuff for the next day. It's a little bit better because we took away those big projects that I should have never had anyway. But what are your hours now? Because you're doing estimates and you're working in the office.
Yeah. So for me, when I was going through Spring Rush, I didn't bracket anything off. I didn't plan for it. It was just, I'm going to show up and I'm going to work until everything's good for tomorrow and just get things, grown. I needed to grow things, get stuff on the schedule, sell everything I could. And I did have an estimator at the time, which made dealing with the leads themselves very easy.
Mm-hmm.
And it also gave me the opportunity to kind of go into maker mode and come up with a more robust system for follow-ups and selling and study selling and stuff like that. Now, because my focus, now that we've raised our prices, is keeping costs low, bringing in profit for the location, and sustainability is my personal focus, I've bracketed my time off a lot more where when I do my team meetings, I tell the crew, if you need something, don't come over to my desk and talk to me about it. Leave the room and shoot me a text. Go get your truck ready. I've got stuff to deal with myself. If you need me, come into the office after you're ready to go, and then I'll deal with it if I haven't gotten to your message already. And I will spend, my first hour of the day kind of planning what I'm going to do for that day, routing the estimates that have come in the night before and the day before. Let's see. Double checking everybody's route, checking to see if any clients who are on the schedule for the day have emailed in, stuff like that, things that need to be dealt with immediately. So every once in a while, there's a fire that needs to be put out right away. And then after that, I will deal with either a bigger picture task, like for example, last week was about invoicing. I'll just deal with something like that, or I'll deal with some complaints. I'll spend some time dealing with tickets. And then at about 9 o'clock, I will leave the office. I will go out and do estimates until about 1 p.m., 2 p.m. I will get as much as I can done. And then when I get back, I will start the schedule. My crew starts getting back around 3 to 5 o'clock. So I have to talk to them a little bit, talk through their day, talk about their performance. And then after that, from about 5 to maybe 6:30, if I didn't get the schedule done previously, I will finish the schedule and then deal with some last minute tickets and whatnot, kind of sit and think about how to solve a bigger issue in the business that I don't know how to deal with quickly or efficiently yet because I haven't experienced it.
So somebody has to do that and they have to do estimates too. Did you have to retrain the way that the crew thinks so that they think for themselves, resolve things for themselves, act like an owner and resolve things? Because I had to change that too, because I would have guys that were texting me telling me they couldn't find a place to park. Like, hello, like I could help them find a place to park. But stuff like that. And I had to teach them to find your own parking space, like drive around the corner again. So have you had to retrain them? Because that's a lot of hours to be out of the office when you have a whole bunch of crews out.
Yeah, I've not done a very good job as far as what I want to do, as far as that goes. But I do try to, when I have the opportunity to talk to them, I do spend a lot of time telling them that they need to be empowered to take responsibility for things.
Yeah.
And so when somebody texts me, somebody will send me a text like, "Hey, Corey, there's a gate at this property and I can't get in." I'll just shoot him a quick text because that could be in the middle of anything, sales, a fire, driving.
Totally.
Sometimes I'll just I'll be at a stoplight and say, "Hey, I'm sorry, I'm driving. I can't look at that right now." Totally could. But I'll say, I'm sorry, I'm on the road right now. Just check like the property notes or maybe check the client profile. It might be in there. Every single time it'll work out. And once you get people into the habit of checking for a problem or checking for a solution before making it a problem, they will be able to solve it. And then the only things people will bring you are things that genuinely do need your attention. So yeah, definitely retraining the crew is very important, and it's taken me some time. I have a lot of high school guys, like straight out of high school or young dudes, but it's working out so far.
That's awesome. There are different styles of leadership. So, the way I led, the way Marcus led, the way Lee leads, and then you lead are all going to be different. But the person before you was Lee, and he's a completely different person than you. He's black and white and just, say it and off we go. And you are built entirely different. So I know that's probably been a challenge for you. At what point did you have to like come to a place, I am not them, him and Mike, they're
Mm.
expecting a certain something out of me. I know we talked before, like they would say, because we're working on P4P, we try to have short meetings and get the guys out the door, and they're telling you you're talking too long, and you're thinking it needs to be said. How do you come to a peace about this is me? I'll change what I can, but I'm a different leader than them.
Yeah. When I had first started, my only focus really was to measure up to the task itself, and so to at least meet the bare minimum, because in retrospect, it is a pretty big location, and
Yeah,
I didn't have the skills to do it, and
yeah.
so it was a lot of work just to get caught up with things. Afterwards, I was in a position where, okay, I'm going through winter. I have the time to think about how to do leadership and whatnot. And spring has come. It's time to execute on what I think would leadership would look like. But I didn't have, the experience to do it. I didn't know what I would do in situations. And I did talk to Lee throughout that whole process and like, what would you do? What do you think? And it's very true that like Lee is very black and white. I'm not like Lee, and I can't lead the way that he can lead, or like Mike can lead, or like you can lead. But when it came to those meetings, and I was thinking about why does it take me so long to get through these meetings? Why do I feel, and I was thinking about like, why do I feel like I have to explain everything to the team?
Mhm.
Is because I genuinely didn't think that I was fit to lead everybody.
I
I
see.
didn't feel like I knew enough. I didn't feel like I was doing a good enough job, whether it's, I could do 100 things right, but I missed a ticket or I didn't respond to it in time, and we lost a client because of it and whatnot. It's all, the little things that end up being huge.
Yeah.
And so I've kept record of that on my, I don't like on my heart, so to speak, throughout the whole time doing the job and going through spring rush. It just built up like crazy. And I didn't feel like I was qualified to just say, here's how it is, do it. Listen to me and just do it. But I have realized that the solution to that is to just take a look at the facts, make sure that within the bounds of what's reasonable, I do know what's best, and I do know that telling the team what's best is in their best interest.
Hmm.
And then getting cool with that and then executing. That has done me a lot of good, and I can just show up to the meetings and say, hey, look, we've had 4 yellow slips last week about not closing gates. That's not acceptable. We know how to close a gate. Let's close gates. That's all it takes.
Yeah. So you're trying to say as much as possible in as few amount of words now.
Yes.
I love it. That's awesome. So where are you now? So like revenue, trucks, guys, services.
Mm-hmm. We are at a stable point staffing wise. About 80% of our budgeted hour capacity is recurring revenue, which puts me in a position where I need to sell 3 people's worth of work every week in order to have a fully booked schedule. My market is not allowing for that. It's very difficult at the moment to get stuff on the schedule. People are just a little bit more price sensitive, and there's plenty of reasons for that. I don't want anybody listening to think that getting into the habit of analyzing the things that are out of your control are going to
Yeah.
do you some good. Don't
Mhm.
worry about how bad the economy is right now. Don't worry about who the president is. Don't worry about whether or not you have competitors, or like a number of competitors. Worry about whether or not what you're doing is the best you can do.
That's
And that's done me a lot of good. I'm fortunate to have the Bellingham location with a size where if necessary, I can cut staff and guide people to a position where they can find stable work, because we do have enough recurring revenue, probably no matter what happens, for like 5 to 6 people throughout the rest of the year. But it's been relatively difficult for this location to succeed this year. We focused
mhm.
on growth, so this year, for moving forward, we're just going to focus on covering expenses and bringing in profit for next year. We are over capacity on assets. We have more trucks than we need. It does give me the opportunity to send people solo and kind of overschedule them and put them in positions where they can train and whatnot. And I'm taking this year, because I don't have the opportunity to bring in good numbers, to build a good team instead and train people and invest in them as people. give them opportunities to struggle, learn, and succeed.
Yeah. So now we've moved Lee out. Nick is there 1 day a week, but you still communicate with him. And Mike is definitely out. So now we made another change in the last couple weeks, and that is to take Mike completely out, not coming to meetings twice a week, once a week, and to just have you take over everything and see if you could do it. Not only that, to realize that now we've put him in maker mode and now we're like trying to shave off hours. And how do you feel about that? Does it excite you that he has confidence you can take it over and you can take something off his plate, or does that make you a little bit nervous?
I really love it. I have so for viewers, some of you have been watching Mike's content for a long time. Some of you are people who, now that we're ramping up the franchise advertising, are looking into who Mike Andes is and want to join the franchise. I haven't been here a long time. I haven't been here as long as Nick, Liz, and Lee, but I've been here long enough to actually be able to see Mike grow as a person as well. And when I had started, he was talking about different things, and he's talking about now, and his content is oriented towards bigger picture, higher capacity stuff. And Mike has basically told everybody, I'm ready to grow again, and I want to sit down and really focus and get even better. And so, just from my perspective, of somebody who's such a fan of Mike Andes, and I'm so grateful to him for everything he's done for me, being able to say I have the opportunity to help him grow even more and become even more amazing, and all I have to do is stop seeing him for half an hour every 2 weeks.
Yeah.
That's absolutely fine. We're doing it.
I love it. And then you would just reach out if you needed a high level decision, or would you just say, hey, this is what I'm thinking, Nick, and you and Nick can make the decision because Mike also has confidence in him. And just if there's something really big like this price raise or something, would you guys then go to Mike for something?
Yeah. For a lot of it, Nick and I are planning on dealing with it ourselves. Even until recently, I thought that Mike was coming to the shop just because he wanted to be involved in team culture and whatnot. I thought it was his way of, staying involved and keeping his pulse on the ground, because I know he really wants to be involved with all the teams he has, even if he can't.
Mm-hmm.
But now that we're going to move him out, it's, if we're going to move him out, we should stick true to it, I think. And so we're going to deal with everything we can. And if we can't deal with it, we'll send it up the ladder. And if it has to go to him, it will. If it doesn't get to him, it didn't need to.
Yeah, that's really smart. So in the next, 2 years, 5 years, what's your plan for the company and what's the plan for yourself?
Next 2 to 5 years, I'm going to spend the rest of this year making sure we can cover our expenses, hopefully to make enough money for us to cover all winter expenses. We want to be profitable through the winter, so we want to make profit throughout the winter. And the goal there is to make enough in profit to cover all of my expenses and an overhead assistant, because there's a lot of overtime that comes with that throughout all of spring rush.
Yeah.
So to cover that additional bill, and then maybe anything else, cherry on top would be to cover all command center expenses.
Yeah,
that's our winter project. That's going to be really hard to pull off. We're not going to be doing Christmas lights. We're going to be just focusing on winter services and proving that a location focused on that can still succeed, so that people who don't have the money to invest in Christmas lights or don't feel comfortable building that level of skill set, we can still show that you can be successful doing winter services without the investment that people are currently afraid of doing.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, further from that, next year we're going to focus on. Originally, we're going to spend this year and next year doing profit or growth. We're going to spend the first 6 months next year doing growth, the 6 months after that doing profit. The goal is to hit 2 million within the next 2 years. We'll see. Mm-hmm. Also, we want to get into the new Augusta Lawn Care Services Bellingham shop.
Yes.
We'll see when that happens. Hopefully that happens before we hit that threshold. But for the next 2 years, definitely bring in as much profit as possible so we can give that money to Mike. He can invest in the franchise. And the 5-year goal, hit 5 million. Hit 5 million in annual revenue.
Sweet. And that would be recurring services and then just hold steady.
Yeah. So like if you mean to say when we hit 5 million, what will we do furthermore?
Yeah.
Yeah. At that point, it would be cutting out projects as much as possible so that 5 million is the recurring revenue, and
Got it.
then taking projects after that's settled. Because I mean, who knows what it'll feel like to run a $5 million recurring revenue
Mhm.
business. So property cleanups and small cleanups for existing clients would already be enough to probably do 1 million in
Mhm.
annual revenue. So making sure that we could sustain the recurring revenue at that point would be my biggest focus. It's a matter of sustainability when you hit that size. If you're, an owner who wants to get out of the business and not have to worry about anything, the way to do that is to make sure that nothing changes. And that's your external circumstances and your internal ones. And so the external, you will have changed no matter what. The market will change, clients will leave, clients will move, whatever it is. But internally, if you have a system that within margin deals with all of that and doesn't change, like mowing, for example, show up at the start of the year, cut the grass. In summer, switch to biweekly, stop cutting grass in winter. Do that every year. You'll be good and you won't have to worry about anything. And you could let the business run for 30 years and it would stay the same.
Yeah. Couple last questions. Many locations in the franchise have had the biggest ones have had a little bit of trouble working with Command Center. What I've noticed about you is so you and I are work. You are kind of the guinea pig for what we're doing. We're still in the baby stages of Command Center and of the franchise, really. And so you've worked with us and been patient with us and stuff. What do you think has been the success that you have been able to work with Command Center so well, being a business over $1 million?
I would say number one, know what I need to do, know what Command Center can do. So Command Center is a changing system. They are trying to make things better, and sometimes things that get better have to change, and something may not even be on the service list in the future.
Yeah.
You never know, and so you have to approach it from the mindset of know what your bare minimum is, know what's asking too much of Command Center, and knowing that they're people. For me, at this size of revenue, I don't have time to be frustrated about mistakes. And so like
Exactly.
if
Yeah.
my crew makes a mistake or if I make a mistake, because I make mistakes all the time. I don't want anybody listening to think that I'm running the Bellingham location with an iron golden fist. I mess stuff up all the time. And if you would be surprised, a staff center of I think about 100 people at this point are
Yeah.
going to make mistakes. If you spend time like, do I report this, or like even writing an email to Yellow Slip is a time out of your day that you could just spend fixing it and knowing like in the future, okay, cool. So this is something that a normal person can make a mistake on. What can I do to prevent that? And
Yeah.
so on the one hand, I try to take as much stuff off of my plate as possible to give the command center, but I also try to take as much as I can off of theirs. So if I know that something is going to happen in the field where, the crew wrap up an hour earlier than everybody else. So, hey man, I'm going to have you go help this guy out. But I'm on the road. I can't assign the jobs to those people. I know
Right.
command center isn't going to like they're going to look at the schedule and see that that person was clocked in for 11 hours,
Yep.
but they had six hours on their route. Like, why is this person clocked in for 5 extra hours in the day? Command
Mhm.
center is not going to know that. Just anticipate that they're people. They don't have all the information. I shoot them a message in my connect team, or I
Yeah.
fix it at the end of the day.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love it. Yeah, it's been awesome working with you. And I know that we make mistakes and my team makes mistakes, but like you said, we all make mistakes and it's just a part of the game. And I know from working with Mike that we were alone, we were trying to do everything and we both made mistakes all the time. And we'd go, my bad, I'm so sorry. The other person would go, all good, and we'd figure it out. There was no time to be mad at each other. We just had to get the mission done.
Yeah, yeah, really. It's all about this is something that Lee gave me. It's a really good unlock. Is if you have a good enough level of judgment for something, if you make if you don't spend so much time focusing on getting every decision perfect and you just make a bunch of choices, if you get 60% right and you do 100, let's say you do 100 normally, 200 otherwise,
Yep.
if you do 60% right, sure, you'll be making 40 more wrong choices,
Mm-hmm.
but you'll be making 60 more per day. And so over 2 days, that's 120. Over 10 days, that's 600. Over a year, you do the math. Like just make the choices, own the wrong ones, own the right ones, and get stuff done.
That's great advice. So, do you have any advice to owners or GMs as we wrap up today?
My advice to GMs is, this is actually for both, is don't take the position if the person above or below you isn't somebody you want to work for. So if you're a GM, don't sign up for a job where you're assuming that your owner can only have your respect if they do everything perfectly. I didn't work for Mike when he started the location, but you've seen his YouTube videos. He's made mistakes. He's done services he shouldn't have done. He took jobs he shouldn't have done. Liz said she scheduled things that were tough for the business. People make mistakes. And if you hold somebody to a standard that's not realistic for somebody who's also still growing, you're going to sour your own position. So approach it from the perspective that they're growing. You have the opportunity to grow with them. And you have, like, it's a good thing for two people to be in a mentor-mentee relationship while both are still improving. For owners, I would say, don't hire somebody who doesn't want to work for you, and stay like under your tutelage. It's your responsibility to teach and train that person. And if you don't want that person asking you questions all the time, and you don't want to constantly keep track of their growth, like, you should give them a lot of responsibility, but you should know where they're at all times. If you don't know where they're at, how are you going to know if they're getting better or worse? So being able to pay attention to that kind of thing and being willing to, even like when you're having a bad day and not letting it get to them, that's important. It's a matter of, it's a dynamic that you both have to participate in. And I think that you would do yourselves a lot of good if you had that healthy relationship.
That's awesome. So is there any quote, book, or podcast you want to throw at us?
For general managers, I recommend Simon Sinek. Fantastic. He's not just a breath of fresh air. He's a gasp of fresh air that's so deep your lungs start to hurt.
That's
optimistic. So take a deep breath in. He will teach you how to lead. He's a very good intro book.
Yeah. Which book are you talking about? The Why book?
Yeah, that one's really good. I've been watching a lot of his video content.
Okay.
Finding your why. One thing that he had mentioned recently was like just about good, healthy team dynamics and taking ownership and being positively accountable in front of your team and admitting that you make mistakes to your employees. General managers, don't fall into the trap of trying to pretend like you know what you're doing. You just got here. You're allowed to not know what you're doing. The owner's allowed to not know what they're doing. They're not 200 years old with 1,000 businesses under their belt. They're normal people too. So there's my advice for people.
I love it. Well, we're going to wrap up for today. So appreciate your time on the weekend. I know this will help a lot of guys going into the GM position, making it through their first spring rush, how to look at things and deal with the challenges that come along with all this. So I really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
You have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Bye. Bye-bye.